Linguistics from the University of Oriental and African Studies, University of London in 1965. My guest also served as a board member of the Ghana Education Trust Fund and Valco Trust Fund. She was one of the commissioners who sat on the National Reconciliation Commission in 2000 to 2004, which looked into the effects of military rule on people in Ghana. I'll take a quick break. When I come back, I introduce my guest for today. Professor Florence Abena Dolphyne is my guest on Legends of Our Time. Hi, Professor. Privileged to host you.
Thank you.
Okay. So, you were born Florence Abena Akesin,
yes,
an Ashanti. And of course, Ashantis are better known for their exploit when it comes to trade. What would inspire or motivate your parents to send you to school?
My mother actually never went to school, but my father was a teacher. He was, those days, the Certificate A teacher. After Senate 7, he went to Wesley College for 4 years and trained as a Certificate A teacher. And he came actually to teach in Achinekrom, and that's how he met my mother.
And then you went to school?
Yeah.
And you know, at the time, to send a girl child to school was a bold decision. What was different in your case? Although you've mentioned that your father was a teacher.
Actually, my hometown, Achinekrom, was, I don't know how, but it was the #1 Methodist establishment in that part of Ghana, you know, Jusso area in the direction of the Lake Busunchi. And so even my mother's youngest sister was sent to school. And when my father came and married my mother, he encouraged my uncles and my grandmother that my aunt should go to Mofrotro. And so because of that, quite a number of young women who were older than me at the time went to Mofrotro, and since then I think almost all my cousins and so on have been through there. So I must say that Achinekrom was a bit unique in this way. They had education. And girls' education became well known. My aunt is, I think she turned 96 2 years ago, so she must be 98 now. So you see, it's quite a long way.
So how was the experience being in school with boys? And also at the time, the perception was that girls should be in the kitchen, not in school. So how did it play out when you went to school?
Well, let me just say that growing up, you know, my father apparently, my parents had a boy, first child, but he died in his infancy. Then I came, followed by another girl, my sister. So my father just decided that if God won't give him sons, he will make sons out of his daughters. So everywhere he went, the two of us were accompanying him. And it was a general standard expression, here comes the Chancellor and his daughters.
How many were you?
Just the two of us. You know, it was later then that he had brothers.
Okay.
So I would say that my father being a teacher really was the reason why we had went to school. The classes were mostly boys and a few girls. And I think the teachers took kindly to us, so really the pressure on girls not finishing school was not so much in Achinekrom. But I remember a mate from Mofetro, who much later in life I met her and she said, you people don't understand how to look at girls who go to school, because in her village, when the first girl to finish middle school, which was in 7, was actually paraded through the streets of a town with a brass band behind her. So,
what an interesting story.
You know, so you can see that at least in that time, it was quite unique for girls to go to school and finish. Because most of the time, too, they went to school at a later age. So by the time they get to Senior 7, they are quite mature and ready to get married.
Okay, that's interesting. And in secondary school, too, interestingly, you went to Wesley Girls, but you ended up at Fanspim School. And that was a boys' school. Share with us the experience.
Well, of course, having been through Mofetro, when we went to Wesley Girls, I was very much used to boarding school life and with all girls and so on. But the reason why we went to Fanspim was that Wesley Girls didn't have a sixth form.
Okay.
And so when a time came for, you know, girls really wanting to go to sixth form, the first set of girls went to St. Augustine's. And then after that, I don't know whether it was pressure from the Methodist Church or pressure from Fanspim, but then we were the second batch who went to Fanspim.
Okay. But how was it?
Experience? It was very interesting. None of us had been taught by a male teacher before, because Wesley Girls, we didn't have a male teacher at all. And so some of the teachers didn't really know how to handle us. And I remember one teacher who made sure that he would call everybody by their surname. And he was this tall, big man, and suddenly you hear your name mentioned, Ackerson, with his deep voice. Yeah. And it takes you a couple of minutes to really get your balance back and you answer a question. But what was funny was that there was a boy whose surname was Wright. And one of our mates' surname was Wright also. So he will shout Right when he asks a question. And both of them will just sit there looking at him. And then he will decide to say man right or woman right. And really, we thought it was very funny because it took so much trouble. You would spend at least a minute or two waiting to see who is going to answer the question and then call it, you know. But the experience at Fanspim was good because I think it built us up for university.
Okay.
Because as I said, none of us had been taught by a male teacher before and all that.
And at Legon too, you went to Commonwealth Hall.
Yes. In Legon, at the time, the 3 halls were Legon Hall, Ekwapo Hall, and then Commonwealth Hall, the last one. And the girls before our time were in what was called the old site. This is the site where I think Achimota Experimental School Preparatory School was started. Yeah, that's where they were living, and so we were the first group of students to go to Commonwealth Hall. There were not many of us. I think there were about 34, 36, and most of us were the teacher training people who had come to do the diploma in education. This was before Cape Coast was started with the diploma in education. So we were there and we had meals with the boys and everything. You know, but as I narrated, we had to go to Achimota for our classes. Okay. Because the lecture rooms were not ready on Legon campus. And so buses will take us from Legon to Achimota. Okay. And they will start from the estates area in front of Ekwapo Hall, we'll collect students from Ekwafu Hall and then Legon Hall. By the time they get to Commonwealth Hall, you know, there isn't much space. And so we had to literally struggle with the boys to get into the buses. And I remember an experience where there was this big, those days, a lot of University of Ibadan couldn't take all the Nigerians. So we had quite a proportion of students who were from Nigeria. And there was, again, this big Nigerian boy who would just hold you by the shoulders, take you from the steps of the bus and put you on the side. And the bus will go without you.
And it's happened to you also?
Actually, it didn't happen to me because, I don't know, maybe the English department lecturers were not too keen on starting first lecture, you know, type of thing. So the bus would go and we would go on the second one. But the older women who were doing the education thing, they had a problem. And normally what would happen then would be that we had these trucks. People are lucky now, they don't have those bone shakers anymore. But the bone shakers will come. And one time, one of them, these older women, was getting down from the thing and sprained their ankle. And after that, we decided that we'll protest. So we boycotted the bus. And would use so the older male students just got their senior the JCR to decide that they would not struggle with the girls on the bus anymore. So that's all.
It became a policy. Okay, so today when you look back, that decision to take you to school, was it worth it?
Very much worth it. And definitely it has affected my bigger family, because the girls there have always gone to Mafretu. They've always, you know. And I think, again, maybe the good thing was that this aunt of mine, my mother's younger sister, went through and passed and later trained as a nurse, worked in Kulubu and then Okomfanochi, got married, and she had, I think, 8 children. So she has become like
a role
model for everybody. And all her children are very strong health-wise. And she herself, as I said, turned 96 2 years ago. She's 98 now, but I remember going to her 96th birthday. And I think that has really affected, And most people don't even know where Achinekrom is, but when people who come from the Jesu area, when you mention Achinekrom, they say, oh yeah, it is, that is a place for education. And I think the Methodist Church has done very well. Right now they have a senior secondary school.
That's good. So Prof. Dolphyne, of all the courses in this world, why would you settle on linguistics as a course? What is that? What is so special about that course?
Linguistics. Actually, it was phonetics that got me into linguistics. The phonetics department was part of the English department at Legon. And we had this English woman who was the head of department. And she used to have some of the students, not students, the teachers of the deaf children in the Mampong deaf school. So they would come and she would go through the way sounds are articulated. So some of the teachers would at least train the children to say the difference between like papa and mama, so they can get the attention of their teachers. You know, we went there a few times just to observe the way they were handling the teaching of sounds to these deaf children. And so some of them were able to just say individual words and get some assistance when they really needed it. And that's what attracted me to phonetics. And of course, English language, we've all had to learn it from, basic school right through. So that really is what, and when I went to London, I realized that linguistics, phonetics is part of a bigger subject, linguistics. So that's how.
But how important is that course or career to society?
Oh, I think I probably wouldn't change it for anything else. Because, to tell you an interesting story, once I met, I was at a funeral, and this young man came and grabbed me from behind. Oh, I didn't expect to see you here. I'm so happy. He had done linguistics and had, I think, done phonetics as a special paper. And although they were always making fun, as soon as students see me, they will make click sounds and things like that just to show, that. But he went to America and saw a program where somebody who had done phonetics was now a speech, whatever, trainer. And he was handling children who had speech defects and so on, and set up his own office, his own center training children, and was making more money than the university professors who were teaching the subject. Because when a parent has a child who has a lisp or something, and can't make certain sounds, they came to him. And when the department had a seminar for me on my 80th birthday, there were 2 people who came who were actually earning their income in speech training, And of course, in Ghana, people will probably invite you to go and help their children speak, but outside, they really pay.
It's a profession.
It's a profession, and you get a lot of money out of it. Yeah.
Wow. That's interesting. So after the completion of your course, you decided to go into teaching, and then from your own school, University of Ghana. Why that decision to go into teaching?
Well, I told you there was this English woman who was running the phonetics department, and she encouraged me, at the time, the university had a policy where if you had a second upper or a first class, they would give you a scholarship to go outside to do master's or a PhD. And so she told me that, look, you can get something to go and do phonetics as a specialization. And at the time, I had younger siblings, and I needed to help my parents to take care of them. So the university scholarship was not quite enough. So I taught at Laboni for a year. And that also qualified me to get, what did you call it? When you are a teacher and you go on study leave, because we were bonded to teach. I would have taught anyway in a secondary school. So I went to teach at Laboni to get me the opportunity to get some allowance when I went on study leave. Then somebody came from Britain to interview students, and for those who wanted to do postgraduate work. So he interviewed me and virtually sort of assured me that I was going to get a scholarship to go to London University. And that's how come I did my postgraduate studies in London University, most of the time, those in our generation who did postgraduate work either went to Cambridge or London. And I went to London and then went into the linguistics department where the phonetics section also was located.
But that's interesting. And I'm imagining as a young person from Achina Chrome, you get to London and then it's a whole lot of experience. You want to share some with us, briefly?
It was quite something. But I suppose I was lucky that because I had the London University scholarship, I was taken care of by the British Council. So by the time I got there, I had accommodation in a hall of residence for girls. So that was Canterbury Hall, and it was within walking distance from the university. So I didn't have to spend money on buses and trains and things like that. And they served meals there and all that, And I think I was the only African girl, and the slightly darker girl there was from Trinidad, but mostly British. And I made some very good friends there, and even in that first year, I spent Easter with this girl's family in Birmingham. And I really enjoyed it.
But what about the issue of race, because racism, because at the time it was at its peak?
It was at its peak. And as I said, that's how I realized how lucky I was that I had accommodation and everything organized for me. Because in the PhD is 3 years, and the first degree in Britain too at the time was 3 years. So if you were in a hall of residence, you could only stay there for 2 years. And most of the students therefore go for the first year and the final year. And during the second year, they look for accommodation. So I had these 2 English girl friends who wanted to go out for a year. So I went, one of them was the person I spent holidays with. So 3 of us went looking for accommodation. The very first one we went to, they advertised the accommodation in the university students' sort of building. And the rule is that they should be prepared to accept anybody, whatever
coming from.
So we went to a house, very nice house, outside of the center of London and so on. And the lady met us and, oh, are you the girls from London University? And I said, yes. And she said, oh, I see. And where does your friend come from? And they said, oh, our friend is African. And she asked, South African?
No.
No, West Africa, from Ghana. And, this was repeated several times. And I began to understand that since they know there are whites in South Africa, we had even told her on the phone that there are 3 girls, 2 British, 1 African. And so they had assumed if an African girl will come and do a degree in London, then that African girl must be from South Africa, because that's where the whites are, and they have educated, people. And when he said no, the response was that, they wouldn't have me because they don't mind having girls. But then when the girls come, and the boys find the place very convenient, they will come and have their wild parties there. So that was my only real experience with. But the boys, the male students who had been there, they've been through a lot of that sort of thing, yeah.
So was that one of the reasons why you decided to come back to Ghana and then work here?
Oh no, that was the way I was going to say in Britain.
Okay.
You know, my mother was here with my siblings going to school, and my father was also doing a degree program in America.
Oh, okay.
And I really needed to be here.
Okay. And you were one of the founding members of the linguistics department.
Yes.
How did it begin?
I think that they had started the linguistics department before I came. And I don't know how it began, but I believe that African studies started investigating Ghanaian languages with Professor Nketia and Professor Ansre. Gilbert Ansre was also there at the time. And so when I came, in fact, Professor Meresa Dakubu, whom I don't know whether you remember, she was in African Studies too. And she was in the same department as I was in London. So she came. Her father was a professor in medical school. So her parents were here, that's why she came. So I met them, and we had that nucleus of people who were into linguistics.
So for a long time, you taught at University of Ghana at the linguistics department. So finally, you became a professor. And I know before you can become a professor, you might have published a lot of research projects. So in your case, how many research works, you did before you became a professor?
I really can't tell you the number. But the good thing was that at the time I came, we had a West African Linguistic Society with universities in Nigeria, Cameroon, and I think Ivory Coast and Sierra Leone. So we used to have regular, every year at least, we all met and had a conference, and you read a paper, and with the comments people make and so on, you upgrade your paper and it's published in our journal, or you can publish it in other international journals outside of Africa. So that was a big help. And then the good thing was that the students were not too many.
Okay.
So you had time to concentrate on your research. These days, the student numbers are such that I don't know how people cope. Yeah.
Well, that's fine. So let's relive the moment, when you were finally conferred as a professor, the first woman professor in Ghana. How did you feel?
I don't know.
How old were you at the time?
27 years or so. So I must have been about 30-something at the time.
At the time. And you became the first woman professor in Ghana.
Well, Professor Dakubu was but she wasn't Ghanaian. She was American, yeah. So for the Ghanaian, that's true.
So with that backing, what advice would you have for young girls who come from villages and even poor backgrounds, with no hope at all? But here's a woman from Achinakru in Ashanti region becoming the very first professor in Ghana. What advice will you give to such young people?
Well, I'll tell the young people, actually, right now, the women are everywhere, in teaching, in industry, in medicine, and so on. And I think that a lot depends on the parents also. People should just push you. And I remember the way my mother just decided that, okay, he has a teacher husband, so he knows what education is about. And I know the number of, I can't count the number of times people would say from the family, hey, so far, you won't let your daughter, because my mother actually lost, yeah, as I said, they lost their first child. And she wasn't a very strong person. Later on, we realized that we had sickle cell in the family, yeah. And I know the aunties and so on who would tell her, Amma, if you don't take care, you are not going to have a grandchild, you know, that type of thing.
Prof, let's take a quick break and then when we come back, we'll talk more. The conversation is becoming interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so the program is Legends of Our Time on GBC News and GTV. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk more because Professor is actually also the very first woman to become Pro-Vice Chancellor of the University of Ghana. So we'll take another break. We'll come shortly. Welcome back. You're still watching Legends of Our Time on GBC News and Ghana Television. On Legends of Our Time, we interact with our heroes. And of course, my icon for today is Professor Florence Abena Dolphyne, Ghana's first female professor and of course the first Pro-Vice Chancellor of the University of Ghana. Hi, Prof. Pleasure again to be talking to you. So now let's go to your portfolio as being the first Pro-Vice Chancellor, a woman at the University of Ghana. How, at what point, you know, were you given that opportunity to serve the University of Ghana?
Actually, I had been a Dean of Faculty of Arts before. And I remember that was a very interesting experience. It was done at the time by voting by members of the faculty. And I remember the Faculty of Arts one, the incumbent dean, he had just finished his term for 2 years. And he was waiting to do, he wanted to do a second term. And apparently he had upset quite a number of heads of departments. So some of the men came to me and asked me to stand. And I said, well, let him have his 2 years, you know, and so on. But they insisted. And I remember very well when I met one female lecturer and said, oh, you know, you are having these elections. I hope you will vote correctly, you know, talking to a woman like that. Yeah. And you know what, she told me in her perfect equanimity that when women get into positions of authority, they don't help other women.
Wow.
So I knew that she certainly was going to vote for me. But I remember very well, when we had the election, I won by 1 vote. 38, 39. And
Dean won.
So I knew I really would have a problem, you know, getting the others on my side. But with a lot of patience, it worked. Okay. You know, some heads of department just refuse to contribute to discussions at the faculty board. So then I decided that at the end of every meeting, I would go around every head of department and ask them to make a contribution on what they've done. And when you have been put on the spotlight, that you have to say something. Yeah. So eventually, I think most of them realized that I'm not such a horrible person at all. So.
You even got a second term. twice?
No, no.
Okay.
I think after that I went on sabbatical or something. But, you know, that was an advantage because then people have worked with you, you know, in administrative and so on. And they know how they can, you know, handle.
Okay.
But that was a difficult one.
Was a difficult. Prof, quickly, what's the difference between a Pro-Vice Chancellor and a Vice Chancellor?
The Pro-Vice Chancellor is just a deputy to the Vice Chancellor. And that also is for 2 years.
Okay.
And so normally the person who becomes Vice Chancellor would have been Pro-Vice Chancellor before. Because that then exposes you to the whole university, not just Faculty of Arts or Faculty of Science or Faculty of whatever.
Okay, so let's look at the University of Ghana under your administration as the Pro-Vice Chancellor. How was it, and what kind of mandate were you given to deliver?
Yeah, the Pro-Vice Chancellor's position is like, as I say, is a Deputy Vice Chancellor, so issues, quite a number of issues, particularly to do with the senior members, you know, the lecturers and so on, and then this senior administrative staff. And I remember the first problem I had to deal with was accommodation for lecturers. It's really, really, really terrible sometimes. And, you know, I had to deal with a case of a woman who was living in a hall flat with her husband. She was a lecturer. And she had a baby. The mother came to help her with it. And the students in the hall, I wouldn't mention the hall, but the students in the hall who were close to the flats would complain about her child crying. I mean, who can tell a child not to cry? So, you know, all times and so on. And she really felt miserable. And she came to talk to me about it and so on. So I managed to resolve that problem because there was a white woman living in a bungalow, 2 bedrooms and a study. And she was just there by herself. And this person had a child and a mother helping her and so on. So I put the situation to her, and she didn't mind.
Okay.
And she agreed. So the young one went.
She exchanged with
Yes, and I know people complained. People complain, she's just looking after the women's, you know, problems and so on. I mean, why can't I understand it. The men just, I mean, all they know is that their children are being looked after by their mothers. So that's it. So that's it. But somehow I did resolve a lot of accommodation problems on campus. And somebody not so long ago told me, oh, I hear when you were in Legon, people were saying that, yes, you were taking, looking after the interests of the women. And I said, how can I expect the men to take care of women's interests? So that's the sort of thing. But otherwise, administrative issues, and as I said, it was mostly things to do with the senior members, you know, senior staff and so on. And luckily, when I was dean, there was a young man who was working as staff in a department that was close to the dean's office. And he happened to be in charge of, he was the president of the SAF Association. And having worked closely with him before, he really became very helpful with the workers. Because when the workers were going on a demonstration, he will let me know. And we'll plan how to resolve the problem even before the thing started. Yeah.
Wow.
So that helped quite a bit. But the accommodation issue really was the main thing that I handled. Yeah.
Okay. Prof. Dolphyne, what would you describe as your most memorable period at University of Ghana?
Well, I suppose my most memorable period was being Prof. Chancellor. And the thing is, it gave quite a number of the women the encouragement that they also stood a chance of getting on. Because I must say that quite a number of the women, not just in Legon, but in the other universities, had a problem. I was lucky. My husband never thought we were in competition. He was an aircraft engineer, and even when people thought he was a Dr. Dolphyne. I mean, when you are a woman and you are not big and tall, people think you are a schoolgirl all the time. So, some people will just, you are standing there at a reception or something, and they'll go to me, "Oh, Dr. Dolphyne," you said, "No, I'm not, I didn't need a PhD to become an engineer, so this is the Dr. Dolphyne." Wow. Yeah. But I think I happen to also have been involved in what we call the Ghanaian Association of University Women. Okay. And we were doing counseling sessions with girls in secondary schools and so on. So that also at least meant that it's not just the university students, we were helping women's education all the time, yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. And of course, once I've asked you of most memorable, let me also ask you your very low points at University of Ghana.
I think it was when I was dean, because I remember, I told you that the men were just angry that I had been elected by one vote.
Dean one.
So there was one particular professor who was very nasty to the two young women in his department. They were just doing their work and everything, but he always was finding fault with them. And so I had to go and sit him down with each of the women at a time. And we would discuss what the problem was, and when the female staff has left, I will have a chat with him and tell him that, these people are not just girls. They are women who are teaching in the university. If they were teaching in a secondary school, probably they would have become headmistresses and so on. So just learn how to deal with them properly. And he was so mad. He just told me off in no uncertain terms in front of his office, and students had finished lectures and were going by. I was so upset. I don't think I've ever been so upset.
Wow.
The only thing I did was just to get into my car and go home. I lived on campus, so that wasn't a problem. But that was my real lowest point. But later on, he learned his lesson. Everybody got to hear about it. And so I think his friends must have told him off quite a bit. There were other issues, but I think that now I'm happy that we have the second female Prof. Chancellor now, also from linguistics.
Wow. We can't conclude this interview by not giving you the opportunity to talk on your autobiography, touch on it. So you've titled it From Achina Krom to Pro Vice Chancellor, briefly, what inspired you picking this title? For that publication.
Well, actually, it was a cousin of mine who suggested it. But the thing is that I thought it will give encouragement to people. That even if you don't know, people don't know the name of the town you came from, you know, you still have the opportunity to get up to whatever standard that you really want. Yeah.
And beyond linguistics, you've also been writing on human rights, women's rights, the use of our mother tongue, especially. I'm interested in that one. Why should we make it a point to let our kids know or understand our local languages?
Oh, that. No, I'm sure those who don't speak any local language will never do linguistics anyway because they will have a problem. But the thing is that, you know, this country, we have a whole range of people. There are people who speak 3 Ghanaian languages, and it's not difficult more. You know, I mean, I was speaking to school from 1 in secondary school. Because I went to Cape, I started speaking Fanti as well. And of course, with a name like Akason, people thought I was Fanti. Yeah. And then we went to Form 2, and we had this large group of Ghana girls from Government Girls' School in Accra. And we are speaking our Fanti, and they will tell us that, what is this, you know, what they call it, like village language that they are speaking. I said, you've come to Cape Coast and you think the people's language is, you know. So we all ended up speaking Ga. So when we meet as a group, classmates, Ga is our common lingua franca. And I'm saying this to let people know that learning a second language that you have friends from, where you can just keep talking to them. You don't have to have a book to learn that language. You see what I mean? Just picking up expressions from them before you can say, Jack, you can speak the language. I've given 2 examples in the book of how a woman who was Eve, but had grown up in Takrady. Okay. So her Fanti was perfect. And when she came to give evidence, she spoke Fanti throughout. And her things were seized because they said she was Kalabuli and hoarding drinks. They took them all. And then when they driven her goods out, the leader of the team called her and said, get into the pickup. And she knew that if she got into the pickup, they would take her to some place, molest her, and all that. So she just said a prayer to herself. When people are in a serious crisis like that, you know, they usually would put their hands to their head or something and say a prayer. And the prayer was in heaven. So this soldier who was ever said, "Nye bro," and she said yes. Wow. I said, oh, leave her alone, let her go. After all, we've taken all her drinks, she's lost all her money. If he had known that she was, probably they wouldn't even have taken her goods, you know. And then there was this one who was in a place that they kept people they had arrested for something or other. And some of them were never seen again, and so on. And he was there when in the middle of the night, the guard there came and said the boss wanted to see him. And he knew people who have been taken away who never came back. And he said something in a language that the guard didn't understand. And he said, what language was that? And he said, Latte. And you know, Latte is just in Latte. I mean, 2 lower town and upper town type of thing. And so it's not a language that most people know. So he asked him, are you from Latte? And he said, yes. And he said, you know, our boss here is from Latte. Let's go and see him. So he went with him. The man had a long conversation with him in Latin. As I said, Latin is just two towns, adjacent to each other. Okay. So people tend to know the families and so on. So the man realized that actually he is indeed from Latte, and he just told us, so my countryman, this is you want to mess him up. Yeah. And he asked the man where in the area he lived, whether he knew anybody. He said, oh, he had friends in a particular place. So they drove him there, and nobody, he just went through. So I don't know, but I think that people don't realize how important it is, because when you really feel deeply about something, it's your first language that comes to you.
Your first language. Briefly, the national reconciliation that happened 2002 to 2004, I mean, years after, do you think we have achieved the aim for which we put the commission together as a country?
All I'll say is that I hope and pray with all my heart that we will never get a military government.
Why, Prof?
Because if that is how the military react to civilians, then really, I don't think we do. But I think, some of the military, when we were sitting, General Eskin was one of our members. Okay. And when we heard stories about how the soldiers were treating people, he would say, when you go on the service outside of Ghana, people say Ghanaian soldiers are so disciplined, they are so pleasant, they are so this and that. And right here in Ghana, you can't show that thing to you. So I gave, those examples in the book just because it's something that hit me very strongly, yeah.
Was there a particular story that actually made you feel that bad, being a member of the commission?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, they're not like the women. They will go to Makola and say that you are selling garden eggs above control price. In Volga, people were supposed to be selling pito at above control price, and cola nuts. Where in Ghana is there a control price for this? So what I said was that I hope in Ghana, sooner or later, we'll get into the habit of using scales for weighing vegetables and things like that. So then we'll say 1 pound of tomatoes would cost, and we know what the control price is. Yeah.
Okay, we have to wrap up, but Prof, briefly tell us about your family. I know your husband is Mr. Kofi Dolphyne, not Professor Dolphyne.
He was Mr. Kofi Dolphyne, and he actually passed on 3 years ago.
Oh.
So, yeah.
Sorry.
And I do say in the book that I wish all the men who get married to professional women will help them build up their careers, because in the long run, a mother is the one whose influence, affects their children most.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Tell us about your children, how many of them, and then how were you able to juggle homework? I mean, it could be challenging, I know.
Yeah, actually, what was challenging initially was that I had my sister's children were living with me because they were in the U.S. for quite some time. Because I had Kuba at much later in life, and then
what age? What age? I'm curious. What age? Ekuba, what age?
Oh, what age? She was born in 75.
And how old were you
and
at the time?
So that's why when I was 13, so I was just about 40.
Okay.
40, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So it wasn't easy.
But the grandchildren came. Because initially
I'm still waiting for the grandchildren.
Oh, no, for your mother.
For your mother.
Yes.
She was quite happy.
Okay.
And then later on, people would say, "Hey, I'm a woman," and said, "Ah, what you said she was, her father was making a boy out of her." No. But and then I have a stepchild too.
Okay.
She's also graduated. She did French in Legon and done law too.
Okay.
So
You appear very happy, Prof. A very happy person.
yes, I don't think I can complain.
Okay. No regrets.
Not really. You know, when I look at how other people have struggled, I was the youngest in my class most of the time, and so I had an advantage having had a teacher for a father.
Okay.
And I think that is something that people should learn, that just because you have married an educated woman, she is not the only person who should be doing homework with the children. You see what I mean? Because children respect their fathers. Mothers, they take for granted. So when a father takes an interest in his child, it makes an impact on the children differently,
Okay.
you know. So I hope that will be taken seriously.
Okay. And before we go, let's look at some principles you've held on to become Prof. Dolphyne over the years.
One thing is that I think people should treat every person they meet with respect. You know, personally, when people read, everybody thought I was fancy. When then it was when my daughter came and they heard me talk Tree with the Asante. They said, "Oh, why do you let your house help teach your daughter to speak Tree?" And I said, "It's not my house help. It's me and my mother." And so it's no big deal, you know. So I think that the home background means a lot. And it doesn't matter if your parents are both professors. If they don't have time for the children wouldn't probably achieve the way they wanted them to. And I also believe that sometimes I've known homes where the fathers have treated their wives as if they were just there, you know. I think that the relationship between father and the mother really means a lot, because children observe things very closely, and they get to know who is getting the respect and who is being bullied and that type of thing. And I don't think that it's augurs well for the children in the long run.
Your Dolphyne, which part of the country is it coming from? I like it. It's an interesting name, you know.
It's an interesting name. I learned that we went to Holland when we got married for 1 week. And the home we stayed, the people we stayed with said, "Oh, you know, Dolphyne is a Dutch name." Later on, another professor who came and said, "Oh, you know, your name is a fish."
That's dolphin.
The dolphin.
But yours is Dolphyne.
The Dutch, the British will call it dolphin.
Oh, okay.
But the Dutch call it Dolphyne.
Dolphyne.
And in fact, there was once a Dutch ambassador, a woman, who got in touch with me and said that they had a Dolphyne house in Elmina. And wanted, but my husband didn't grow up in Abena, so he didn't know.
So where is he from?
His father was from Elmina.
Okay.
But he was a timber merchant.
Oh, okay.
And did all his work in Axim, because when they fell the logs, they put them on the river, and River and Cobra is just in Axim, so the ships will come there and collect them. And that's where he married my mother-in-law.
Okay.
So he actually doesn't know Elmina, apart from going to the castle.
But so the Dolphyne is from Elmina?
The Dolphyne is from Elmina.
My last question, Prof. Dolphyne. how do you want us to remember you? Generations to come.
Well, I think that remember me, maybe that's why the name of the book is like that. That it doesn't matter where anybody comes from. You may come from the tiniest village on top of a hill or near a river, and if you, with determination and encouragement from your parents and friends, you can make it.
Thank you so much, Professor Florence Abena Dolphyne. Indeed, we are so proud of you, and we say, are you cool? May the good Lord continue to protect and bless your effort. We are so grateful for this interview.
Thank you very much.
So it has been Legends of Our Time on GBC News and Ghana Television. My guest for today has been Professor Florence Abena Dolphyne, Ghana's first female professor, and of course the first female pro-vice chancellor of the University of Ghana. My name is Gifty AJ. I'll see you, God willing, next week. Bye for now.